I'm hitting buttons feverishly. Are we ready? Are we online, Mr. Carter?
Yeah, thanks for the warning.
I gave you the warning.
We're a little bit slow on the
Never mind. All right. So
now, just to double check, Shak, you can hear us now.
Yeah, I can. Thanks. I hope that I wasn't just broadcasting a second ago.
It doesn't matter. This is Edge Radio. We fly by the edge of our job.
That's right. It's called Edge for a reason. Hey, look, very excited to get into today's show because we've got a lot to talk about. We actually started. We've just finished another show, which some of the subject matter I think flows into today. So we will cover that as well as we go. But right now, I'll throw straight to you, Derek. Let's jump into the show, mate.
It's been a big week on the Australian political front. Now, remember, three things affect the economy, well, the stock market, and that is politics, economy, and interest rates.
And me.
The Albanese government has basically broken its promise to the Australian public to not tamper with the stage 3 tax cuts that it said it would.
I can't imagine Albanese not telling the truth.
These are coming in from the 1st of July. And what they've basically done is adjust the rates. It was going to be a very simplified rate for most income earners within Australia, and it was going to be at a bracket that was around the 30% mark for those earning from $45,000 up to $190,000. It's going to be a straight 30%. And what they've come in and said, oh, no, we're going to adjust it. We're going to tax the more higher income ones from 135,000 to 190,000 and reintroduce this 37% tax bracket. Now, of course, what they're doing is getting the majority in there and saying, yeah, we're going to tax the rich sort of thing.
But that's not rich.
Exactly. That's not
tradespeople.
And you also line that up against inflation. We had the show last week where, 100,000 is the new $60,000. This is what they're not considering here. Okay, the people who are in those lower tax brackets get a bit of a break, and that's fantastic. But that was planned anyway. This is on the back of course, the booing of at the Australian Open, and I will give it that ScoMo was also booed at the Australian Open. So the conservative tennis crowd does like to boo its politicians when they go up to present trophies. But this is a backflip. It is going to be interesting. Liberals going to take advantage of this and say, "Hey, you broke your promises." This is another one to kind of rub their noses in and say this. But why is this being done? Well, obviously the government has spent a lot of money. It's got a bit of a cash flow issue, and so it's
a massive cash flow issue.
Yeah, huge tax flow issues, and so we're going to tamper with the tax 3 rather than just let the economy try to correct it and fix it itself and do free enterprise.
Because we're going to election in less than 12 months. He's got to be seen to be doing something. So he's trying. And from my political opinion on this one, he's doing exactly what Scott Morrison did to lose the last election to Albanese. Albanese just shut up, went in, did his thing, and he didn't do anything. He just wasn't there. He didn't exist. It's sort of like Biden when he was hiding in his basement. So when you're not talking to people, you can't stuff up. So, and I have to say on this one, the Liberals actually don't need to do anything. The media is destroying Albanese for them. I think Peter Dutton, if he came out and actually started trying to I think it actually backfire on him. I think he's just keeps doing what he's doing, focusing on the cost of living side of things. But my brother's a Sparky. If he was house bashing, so that's just building new houses, he would start $130,000 a year. So plumbers are roughly the same. Painters are even more. It's just, I do not know a trade that wouldn't be affected by this. And you have to think about how many tradespeople we actually have in Australia. This is probably one of the most stupid and retarded bills that I've ever heard of.
Especially when you've got a housing issue in Australia. They've let in 500,000 migrants in. There's not enough houses and infrastructure. Let the economy fix it, okay? Don't tax those who can build houses.
And we need to get the government out of the approval process.
Exactly. And I also see this as a back foot play by the Labor government because, of course, it's got egg on its face after the referendum. How many millions of dollars has it wasted on an issue that most Australians are going, get lost?
It was a non-issue in the first place. It was not needed. There was absolutely nothing needed with it. So we have lost Aaron. I don't know what he's doing. So, but anyway, he's off pressing buttons.
The historical stuff, and Shak, I'd love your input on this. If you look at a bit of a case study when Trump got into power, one of the things he does was lower the company tax rate. He also gives big international firms a holiday tax break to get money offshore back into the country, saying, you know, I want these iPads made on American shores. You know, keep in mind, America was coming out of recession. Now, I know it's a bigger economy. I know it's a different circumstances, and Australia is very much, in terms of GPD, small fry compared to the United States. But it's interesting to see that when taxes are lowered, how the economy then is pushed along. We have an issue of labor shortages, so I know why they're trying to bolster this, but it's imploding in the fact that they don't have the infrastructure. Now you burden the people with a bit of a tax cut on top of inflation. How's this going to play out? How do you see this, Shak?
Well, first of all, it's terrible tax policy. And I'll just give you one example as to why. Before the incredible Lady Ardern became the Prime Minister of New Zealand had a flat tax rate. They had 30% flat taxes and a 15% GST. No capital gains tax at all. Okay. And so you would ask the question, did they raise more money or less money as a percentage of their GDP than Australia? They raised more. We were taking around 27% of our GDP, and New Zealand was raising about 33%. So whose tax plan is the best? Well, I would argue New Zealand's one was. What you tend to find is those countries with more simplified tax codes where it's easier to comply, and it's indirect taxation, things like consumption taxes, which is basically a GST or a sales tax or a VAT or something like that. Those tend to be the countries that thrive with innovation. When you look at countries that are trying to grow, what do? They often will set up what's called a special economic zone or a free trade zone. They give special tax treatment to foreign investors that wish to invest into the country and create jobs. So what do we do in Australia? Do we incentivize Australians to invest in Australia? Not really, because if you're a successful Australian, you must have gotten that success off of the back of the poor, right? It's because there's so many homeless people that you're so successful, seems to be the thinking. So they'll punish hardworking Australians and give tax breaks to foreign countries and foreign companies. This just makes no sense. This is why I personally invest, I'm digressing, but this is why I personally invest in many other countries, because I can take advantage of special tax treatment like I can't when I'm back in Australia. But it comes back to the point that I've been making for years. If you look at any centre-left political party around the world, or heaven forbid any further to the left political party around the world, they have one policy. They have one solution. Doesn't matter what the problem is. They have one solution for it. Raise taxes. Just think about it. If you have a housing shortage, what's the solution that they propose? Raise taxes. If you have, a problem with cost of living, raise taxes. If you have a problem with the grocery stores being out of control, raise taxes. If you have a problem with climate change, raise taxes. Name for me a single issue that the Labor Party or the Democrats or anybody else who is on the left has actually faced where the solution that they have come up with has been something other than raising taxes. This is a party full of idiots that is voted for by people who have absolutely no understanding of anything other than, oh, well, I'll just take it from them. It doesn't work like that. Grow up and do something with your life. And if you're in politics, grow up and take some responsibility for actually making the changes. Don't just go around blaming everybody else.
Yep.
Go on.
So one
Sorry,
thing
did I sound a little bit pissed off there?
Oh, you should be. One thing I encourage as many people as they can. They need to educate themselves about the systems that they're in. And it really irritates me when people turn around and say, oh, this corporation didn't pay tax or that one didn't pay tax. And they're talking about income tax. Other than income tax, just so the listeners can actually understand what a business has to deal with, especially when it's a major corporation. How many other taxes and hidden charges do they have to deal with on a daily basis which are not included in income tax? But straight off the bat, I can think of payroll tax. I can think of the staff wages tax, GST that they're paying, their staff that they're paying their wage. On top of that, they've got the super, they've got to pay I think we're up to 12% or something now. Then they've got their own personal income tax as well. So
And
there's
not to mention all the fixed costs you have to run a business as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing for a small business, and I'm talking like 1 or 2 employees to burn 10 grand just like that, just to keep the
Instantly.
doors open. It's nothing.
and if you have a look at how much your insurance, especially when you're running a business, the cost of your insurance as a business versus your cost as an individual. So I've been helping out with a strata company at the moment, and you have a look at what it costs to insure a strata company versus what it costs per house to insure your personal residence is insane. It's like a good 30-40% extra.
Yep.
So
So
plus what does it cost for licensing?
Yeah.
Right. There's another hoop that you have to jump through is you need to get licensing for all these things.
Well, have a look at this directly below us, just here, PPCA and the number and the APRA license. So we're our Edge Radio as well, because we've fully complied with, unlike other digital radio stations where they just send it offshore, we've actually fully complied with Australian copyright laws. And YouTube and Facebook still annoy the shit out of me because they keep copyright striking us, even though we're legally allowed to play all this music. So that costs, that's probably our biggest expense. That and rent at the moment is the biggest expenses for rent for Edge at the moment, and it's insane.
I think also what's happened in this taxation debate is the whole thing on negative gearing is coming up again. Now, it hasn't been ruled on. And you think about this, guys, how crazy the proposal to punish the property investor who's negatively geared. You do this, it's crazy. I'll tell you why. All right, who wins in the equation?
Oh, the banks.
Right, the banks win, the tenant wins, the government win because they don't have the responsibility to provide housing for that individual. They actually have a private investor doing that for them. Who else wins? The property managers win, right? Everyone wins except the negatively geared investor because they're losing money on the deal. That's why it's negatively geared. Now, when you've got a government who's gone, oh, we'll let in 500,000 immigrants into the country, you need every negatively geared property investor you can find right now, because if you say negative gearing is out, they'll go, fine, we'll sell the properties. Boom, you've lost tons of housings and potential rentals to be able to do that. And they're already punishing, might I say, property investors in some areas like in Victoria, where they're not allowing, and they're trying to introduce this into WA here as well, they're not allowing landlords to have Airbnbs. Now, think about that for a moment, right? They can only have an Airbnb for 3 months of the year. This is because they want to help sort the crisis. And you go, well, where's the freedom in the person who has gone to the expense and taken the risk of buying this property and going into this investment, and suddenly you're changing the rules on dynamics and saying, the numbers may have been crunched when they did the deal and saying, yes, if we do this as an Airbnb deal, this will be profitable. And then they're positively geared, and they're going to be forcing positively geared property investors to be negatively geared where they're now losing money. They'll be forced to sell. You're going to cause problems in the property market if you do this and get rid of negative gearing.
So this is a tough one because Airbnb won't solve the housing price problem. The biggest problem at the moment is, and as the Facebook user said, I think the reports come out, 700,000 people came into the country. So the government only built housing, or sorry, I shouldn't say they approved housing for 175,000 people. So this isn't taking into account natural birth rates or growth of the country naturally. This is purely for the immigration side of things. Obviously, we've got people passing away, so they don't need the houses. It's just the biggest argument at the moment, and I'm going through this at the moment. We're trying to get permits and approvals and all that sort of stuff. It is next to impossible because there's so many people. Also, they know how bad it is at the moment, so there's all these other people trying to get these approvals and permits to get through the council. The councils are knocking back all these approval permits. So even going so far as to build a granny flat in your backyard to help out for like a family member so they can have a home, you can't do it. The councils are probably the biggest hurdle at the moment for property development.
Not just that as well, but if you start saying that landlords can only lease out their property for Airbnb for 3 months of the year, you're going to affect the tourism sector as well. You want money coming into the country to spark the economy. You need Airbnb to do so, right? You need bigger families because look at my family. I've got 4 kids. Do you know how impossible it is to get a room in a hotel, motel, where we all can stay in the same room? It's really hard to find that and to house us for a week or so. You have to go to Airbnb to do so because we're a large family. You're going to cut so much more of the market in terms of tourism if you do that.
The biggest problem with that is there's no point having an Airbnb for 3 months of the year. because you got to advertise it prior to that.
Yep.
And if you're only doing it for 3 months a year in this market, I don't know anyone who would accept a 12-month rental. Like, they'll take anything because they need a house, but I'll guarantee you most of them are like 2 or 3 year rental leases. You'd be crazy not to do anything more because they can just kick you out at any time. So then you've got someone in a house for 9 months, they get kicked out, they go Airbnb for 3 months, and they go into a long-term lease again. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So the other one is, especially when you're going into strata or apartment complexes, a lot of the stratas have bylaws to say what you can and can't do with those properties. So a lot of them will actually say no Airbnb allowed in that complex. So that's another thing when you are buying investment property. If it's in a complex or if it's a strata property, read the bylaws. The amount of people I'm talking to at the moment, they're buying properties and they're going, oh, I'm not allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. And it's like, well, did you read the bylaws? It should be part of your settlement documents, and they're not actually reading it. And this is why I'm saying education is super important.
And any property with a restricted covenant on that, read the fine print really carefully. I looked at a beautiful property down Yellingup Way last year, and it was or the year before, can't remember, 12, 18 months ago, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Perfecto. And but what the problem was is that it was on a restricted covenant, so you can't paint the house a different color other than what's stated. You know, it had to be blue and gray. You couldn't actually have the kids leave their toys out the front. The bins couldn't be left out the front. The kids, you know, I saw it, I said, this is rife for problems with the family. Kids leave toys out everywhere. You know, do you want,
don't come to my place?
do you want the strata kicking up a fuss because they've left their tricycle out overnight?
There's been a heap of law changes on that as well, because any strata bylaws that are considered discriminatory, like against children or people or whatever, they are no longer enforceable. So
but
even if they're in the bylaw, so that's where it gets really, really complicated.
And where it gets complicated too is, like, if you want to put a granny flat out the back, well, it has to be within the width of the house to hide it from the street. And you're like, you know, this property that I was looking at, it's on 4 or 5 acres of land, and basically you can't do anything with that 4 or 5. It's just gardening. It's just crazy.
So we do have a comment here. Take away negative gearing worked so well when Keating did it. Rents went up, vacancies went down, interest rates rose, that and fringe benefit tax tipped Australia into a recession. So it's I think negative gearing is stupid, because I just don't see the point in not owning an asset, like not paying it off. And like I know there's ways you can make it work. I just think it is fraught with peril. You're never actually paying it off. And when the loan comes due, let's say you do go negative gearing for 5 years, and then you plan, you know what, I'm going to refinance the house in 5 years. But with me, during that 5 years, let's say you have a motorbike accident and you're no longer able to work. How you don't afford to do that refinancing? All of a sudden, you're stuck with a house you can't get rid of.
I totally agree with you, Travis. I mean, we saw that when the property market went flat, and then suddenly all these negative geared property investors that I had been working with are saying, why am I doing this? I'm working hard so that everybody else can benefit. And yes, as an investment thing, one of the things we teach our students at Blue Sky Factory is you never do an investment for a tax break. You do an investment because you think it's going to make you money. If you get a tax break, that's a bonus, right? And this is a problem. But if you all have a situation as government where you've already got a ton of negatively geared property investors already, and you take that away from them, you're going to cause major issues in the real estate market if you do so. Not just for the investor, but for the tenants who are in that property as well, because suddenly they've got to deal with a new owner,
new landlord, new plan, new relationship. Now, the other thing as well is how many people, especially when you're in real estate, like if you in Australia, the tenant actually has more rights than the owner of the property, which is really bad. But so what happens is you're always happening to upgrade to make sure the property meets certain standards. So the standards for a tenanted property is way stricter than what it is for a normal residence. So for example, if you have to go and do the roof at the moment, you're starting at $15,000. So most positively geared properties, if you have to do one major form of like repairs to the house, all of a sudden that positively geared house is straight away into a negatively geared house. So obviously you get your tax deductions. There's enough deductions just on a standard property as it is that you don't need to negatively gear a house to make money or get the tax breaks. You've got that many tax breaks there anyway.
And, you know, even the small things that people don't really account for unless you are a property investor, things like, you know, the tenant complains that there are too many cockroaches on the property. I had that situation where we had a lot of
control. It's their problem.
Well, here was the thing, right? I lived in that house. I knew that every spring the roaches were out, and it's simply because there was a bit of bush in the thing, and and it looked pretty and beautiful. All you had to do is get a border spray and spray it around the property. $9, right? They want to, the property manager wants to bring in a professional pest controller, and you're going to be back $220 to $250 at those rates. I'm sure it's gone up now. And you're going, you have a lot of those little expenses incur here, there. You're exactly right. You've gone from positive geared to negatively geared if you're not careful of managing those expenses.
Yep. And if you've got a good accountant, they'll have a depreciation schedule for you. So all the stuff when you repaint, change the doors and all that sort of stuff, you can tax it off over years anyway. So Shak, you're back. You owe 2 cartons now.
Yeah, except I've got no choice. I'm overseas, so I have to keep my phone on. I just want to weigh in on a couple of the comments here. So I'm not as averse to negative gearing as you guys are. I would suggest that you probably shouldn't negative gear your entire income away, but the idea that you might negative gear some properties, especially when those properties have that amortization schedule on the building itself, that could fit. It depends on how high your income is and what your position is.
And how many properties you have.
About what happens if you have an accident or something, well, you should have insurance and that sort of stuff. So a financial planner should have sat down and made sure that you're in the right position and you're going to be safe if your conditions change before they put you into a negative gearing type scenario. I'll also just make the note that negative gearing, the way that people think about it, is when you are paying more in interest and you never pay off the principal on a property. But that's not the only way of effectively negative gearing an investment. If you pay off interest by borrowing money to buy shares, for example, and you never actually pay back the loan, you just pay interest on it in the hope that the shares, or if you take an index or something, in the hope that index will continually increase by more than the rate of inflation, then that could be a strategy that would work for you. And of course, the super rich, we know, borrow then against the equity that they have, which creates a situation where the interest on those loans are tax deductible. Their income doesn't exist because it's a loan, and so they're not paying any tax. So these are some advanced tax strategies that some of the super rich and their accountants use. I don't have too much of a problem with that, to be perfectly honest. And back to the point about government passing certain rules and laws and all this sort of stuff. You said before something that you and I have both said, I think, on previous shows about learn the system you're in. I think you should pay attention to what the politicians are doing. And as much as you don't like it, there's always some segment of society that's going to benefit from it. And what you do is you simply move your money to those segments of the society that are most going to benefit from those rules, no matter how ridiculous they are. Last point I just want to very quickly make. I don't know exactly what the rules are that you just said about strata rules, being deemed to be unenforceable if they're, potentially discriminatory. Certainly, we would hate to see our strata companies turn into the debacle that HOAs are in the United States. But define defamatory then. Does that mean that I can just say that I'm not white, so I culturally, need to have my rubbish out the front? You know what I mean? Like, because we're seeing a society now where we're being told that it's racist for you expect to have people show up on time because for some people time is fluid, all this other shit. So, maybe I should just start. Maybe I'm on the wrong side here. Maybe I should join the Wakesters and just go, yeah, look, I need special treatment.
Please don't.
Let me just add.
I don't think I can. I just don't think I'll be able
on.
to pull it off with a straight face, but I can give it a go for us. I've started with the skirt already.
You're not that good an actor, mate. I'm telling you right now.
Let me just add something to the whole property investment. Most property investors own one house.
Yes,
right?
good point.
Huge percentage.
70% of them own it. Then there's 4% of those property investors who own more than 4 houses. So I agree with you in principle. Yes, if you have multiple properties, then okay, you've got some that are offsetting others in terms of the negative geared and all that sort of stuff.
If you've
but
got
most mum and dad investors own the one, 70% of them.
If you're own more than one property, you really should be doing the courses that you have at Blue Sky Factory because they shouldn't be in your name in the first place. So, and that's where having the financial education to actually understand how and where you should be storing your property and your assets and what you can do with them, what you can't do with them. Some of the complicated things that Shak was saying about lending against houses to buy shares, which makes them negative geared. I have no idea you could do that. I'm dealing with this sort of shit every day. So this is why it's really important to get an understanding of the basics, at
Yeah.
least the basics, so you know, right, you know what, this is out of my league. I'm gonna go talk to Shaq on how to do this.
Education.
I'm
Full
gonna go
stop.
talk to Derek to deal with this. No one's the best at everything, and understanding you're not the best, so go find the best to get the best outcome for you and your family.
Thoroughly agree.
So,
I'm not a property guy, but I will say that, you know, one of the techniques that people will use is that they will try to pay off their personal home. This is why a lot of people negative gear, because let's say you own 2 investment properties, right? Say you own a house, your missus owned a house when you both got together, you decided to keep those houses, and you moved in together to a new house that you bought together. So you've got the income coming from the other 2 houses. Well, you may as well put them on interest-only loans. There's nothing to stop you from offsetting that anyway, and putting all of the money that you can against your residential house that you're living in. Why? Because the loan, the interest payment on the loan on the house that you're living in is not going to be tax deductible, and it's not tax deductible because when you sell the property, it's tax free. For now it is, right? So because that's the case, you only get the tax benefit against your investment properties. It would make no sense to pay off your investment properties if you still have a mortgage on your main house. So this is the big problem, though, which is why I think myself, Stephen Pettit, Derek, Warren, you know, and many others in this field talk about making sure that you've structured your assets properly with advice from tax advisors and people that can help you. Because the major problem that you have is that you make your plans based on what the rules are, and just like that, the government can say, you know what you thought belonged to you now belongs to us because we need more money, because we think we can spend it better than you can, or because we've overspent, we need more, right? And then they change it. That's what we've just seen them do with superannuation. That's effectively what they're doing when they say they're going to raise the income tax, or they're not going to introduce the tax reduction from the 1st of July. They've talked about having an inheritance tax. They've also talked about making it taxable, the profit on your primary residence, if you go over a certain threshold. And like, without giving the same lecture I just gave about the Labor Party always having the same idea for every problem, which is to just increase taxes.
So
no matter how you structure yourself, they're going to come after you. So you have to be very smart, see what's coming, and then try to move your assets around. Now, for a lot of people, this is a moot point because a lot of people don't have the sort of assets that, you know, they need to structure. But I will just say this, and I'll just leave it at this. No matter who you are, if you're on an average income in this country, I think it's about $70,000 a year is the average wage. So that would imply that you're paying about $20,000 a year in tax, in just income tax. Forget about all the others. So that would imply that over your lifetime, you're going to spend about $1.2 million in taxes if you account for inflation. Okay? $1.2 million. Well, I would personally think that money's better off in my pocket than the government's. So even if you don't feel that you're earning enough to justify the cost of getting proper financial advice and tax structuring, I beg to differ.
I'd also say this. Don't be too proud to not get help, because Shaq and I, we get help, right? And one of the reasons I do is because I'm too close to it.
Sure.
In your own situation, there's sometimes I've been in a situation where something's staring me right in the face, but I can't see it.
Sometimes you just need a second set of eyes.
Exactly. And the beauty is we can work as a team, right? And bounce ideas around. I mean, our poor accountant, one of them at the moment that we've been working with, I mean, we've been on the phone to him, I don't know how many times over the last few months, and he's been gracious enough to take our calls at odd times. But that's the beauty of pay the expert the extra amount so that you have that freedom to get the best result that you're trying to.
So you've
Now, I'm going to butt in on this, on a very strange thing, but work with me here, guys, right?
Hang on.
Now, hang
Can
on.
I do
No,
something
this
first?
is
Because
important.
it's really embarrassing for Derek and Shaq.
Oh, then geez, go for it.
So for the people who are watching online, so I have just posted a link. So I totally forgot about this until today. So both Derek, Shaq, Stephen Pettit, and Warren Black have done presentations for the Sovereign Individual and the Global Wealth Club.
Yep.
So my understanding that they do have a online webinar this Saturday.
No, that was the last Saturday.
Oh, was it? It says 27th here.
Okay, mate. Do you math?
29th. Anyway,
There we go.
I know on GWC, on Global Wealth Club, they sometimes do replays of these things. So
Okay. Well, on that point, having said that, I've actually already put that up on the Edge Radio Australia Facebook page because I thought it, and I saw it and I thought, wow, that's something that's
and you
really
need a new
beneficial.
photo, Derek. Your photo is from like 20 years ago. where
They
your
grabbed
hair's-
that off the archives, mate. I didn't have any.
Okay, well, I'm going to
I've
go
already
into.
remade his image
I am
file.
absolutely
But
going to
anyway.
right now throw into what I was going to say, and this is such a big thing with this particular show, the Greater Wealth. Now, we often talk about this. It's about creating the freedom so you can actually live your life purpose. Okay,
But you got to understand the system that you're in to do that.
absolutely. Now, somebody actually contacted Edge with. They were basically pretty angry. Okay, and they said that they didn't.
Sorry, I
like
missed that. They're basically what? Sorry?
They were very angry. Okay,
Oh, very angry. Okay, yeah.
yes,
Yeah, they were a Karen.
they didn't. They were total Karen mode. Because she said that she didn't want to support anything that she said, I don't understand. This doesn't seem to be about freedom because, you're promoting your shows about wealth and about cryptocurrency. So to me, it just seems to be about that. And I'm thinking, wow, we've got so many shows on health and wellness and personal power and this and that and all sorts of things, but you could narrow down on that. That's why we have these shows, because honestly, this education, whether it be in the fiat system, whether it be, the Greater Wealth here, or whether it be a crypto show, these are ways of getting out of the matrix, if you like. These are ways of actually creating that freedom. Like, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you do need money to buy freedom. It's not free, right? You do actually need
Everything comes with a cost.
Absolutely. So when we have shows like this is because we want freedom for people. We want to give people the tools or to give them the information so they will seek out the education so they can find their purpose and actually have the freedom to go and create lives in those endeavors.
And let me throw another question out to you. How many other radio shows would actually give you an opportunity to not directly interact, but send messages through and talk to people on a regular basis with people of Shak and Derek's caliber, who have actually been ingrained into these systems, have been dealing with the major corporations and all that sort of stuff, and actually understand the ins and outs and what they actually do? So,
well, it kind of comes down to what Trump said. Okay, now I say, look, my feelings with Trump are quite complex, right? Some parts I absolutely love, some parts drive me nuts.
You love his hair, don't you?
Oh, it's all about his hair. It's all about the hair
and the tan.
Thanks, mate. Now, but what I was going to say about Trump, and this is amazing. How did a billionaire win over everyday Americans? I'll tell you right now, because when he stood up and said, I know the system's rigged because I use it. Right. Now, when he did that, I mean, he let the biggest secret out there that we all knew was there. Right. And he resonated with the everyday American. That's a very important thing.
My personal belief is that's what painted the target on him.
I
moment he
thoroughly
said that.
agree. So shows like this and other things that we do, and I think is incredibly important, and things like Blue Sky Factory. And as I say, I will pump up your tires all the time, mate. Because I think,
Damien, I love that comment.
I think your courses are fantastic. I think that they open a lot of people's eyes. It certainly opened my eyes. Okay,
thank you.
So from that point of view, no, I was asleep. So no,
literally, he snored his whole way through.
Thank you very much. But this is the way. You need to purchase your freedom. Okay, sorry to say it, but that's a great thing.
I've got to bring this comment up that Damien's put in.
Yes,
schools don't teach any students about money, budgeting, etc.
Not
They
at all.
also don't teach about politics and the systems that you're stuck in. So you have to understand this. And I think the big saver for our modern generation is actually the internet. Because the ability to be able to get information, as much as they try to censor it, there's always ways around that.
But
you
on
can
that
always
front,
get into stuff. You can get the knowledge you need. So back in the 1940s and 1930s and before the internet was readily available, if you wanted to find something out about the financial system, you either had to talk to someone, you had to send a telegram, you had to trust the news.
Sure.
God, have a look what happened with the War of the Worlds. Look how many people panicked over that, not
They thought
realizing it was a TV show. So that just shows radio shows. That just shows how
the power of radio,
how powerful genuine radio was. Oh, anyway, sorry, it's just a dig out, Aaron.
Yeah, when I was at Trinity Grammar in Sydney, we were taught how to write a check and like how to cross the check, not negotiable, and all that sort of stuff. Now, granted that people don't write checks anymore, so no point teaching that. But surely teaching people some basic life skills would be a good thing for a school curriculum. But I do want to respond to the person who wrote in about this show. Yeah, look, this show is more focused on wealth. I think the network or the radio station in whole overall is focused on freedom. This is more about wealth and how to grow it and how to perhaps take advantage of the fact that because the government's in your life so much, the first thing you can do is to try to release some of that tax money that you're paying so you can put that money into assets, and then certain ways that you can start to build a future for yourself so that you're not reliant on the government when you get older. We don't know, like in the United States, for example, Social Security, the Social Security trust funds aren't going to have enough money to pay everybody at the same age. That's why they're increasing the age of retirement. That's why they're reducing benefits, etc. So if you're relying on government to look after you, you're going to find yourself in a very difficult position. I think that you've lost a lot of freedom. But also just on a personal note for me, I'm very proud of Australia. I love Australians. And, I deeply love the Five Eyes countries of the world. I have a great respect and admiration for Switzerland. Why? Because Switzerland gave me an opportunity that I couldn't get here in Australia. I tried for years and years and years to try to get myself, running a hedge fund or something like that. And I just couldn't navigate the landscape here. And I was able to go to Switzerland after being headhunted over there, and I was set up very, very quickly. So what that opened my eyes to is that if you can't find the opportunities in your home country, maybe you should look elsewhere and then come back, right? But the point is that you need to understand all these things in order to have the freedom to say, well, what can I do? How am I possibly going to have the best quality of life that I can possibly have? And that's the way that you do it.
So one thing I need to do, because Orange Brick Road, mental blank.
Brandon.
I was thinking Damien. I'm like, no, that's definitely not right. Brandon is just jumped into the chat, so I've told him Chucky's link to Orange Brick Road.
Oh, absolutely.
He has a show tomorrow from memory.
I'm looking forward to this one. It's going to be a good show.
So he does.
Let's go, Brandon.
Yeah,
that's right. You just had to, didn't you, Shak?
I can't help myself.
Oh dear, absolutely. Well, look, again, it's a great show about escaping the system and making.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, Brandon. When I wasn't sure, I was like, "What did I say there that you didn't like?" But okay, fair enough. I like it.
Hey, I want to change tax a little bit, and not tax. Well, tact, whatever. Look, I've got some sort of sailing. I've got a sailing analogy I'm trying to put in here. We're going to tack here about the fact is we talk a lot about freedom here. Cash is a great freedom. And I see from some articles coming through that a lot of Australians are right now hoarding a lot of cash.
It's a really fascinating kind of insight, because we've had all this information saying that, well, Australians aren't using much cash at the cash register anymore, right?
Which they're not accepting it.
Well, that, but they also are giving the thing, cash is obsolete, so let's go cashless. But a new report has come out to say that most Australians are actually hoarding the stuff. In fact, in June of 2023, it was estimated that most Australians were putting cash aside for a store of wealth or precautionary saving purposes to the sum of $56 billion to $81 billion worth of banknotes in physical notes. And that was accounting for about 55 to 80% of physical bills in circulation, or not in circulation, as you might argue.
Yeah. Sorry, what percentage?
55 to 80%.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Of cash is sitting hoarded by Australians who are nervous about what's going on and having precautionary savings. So now I can say that, when you're getting stories, and it's actually happened to me, when banks are freezing your bank accounts, right?
Yep.
You want access to cash, especially if you're faced with an emergency.
Absolutely.
So you can understand why there's a mistrust in banks. You can understand why in pandemic times people are going, hey, we need access to something. So the reports have been really misleading, saying, oh, they're not using as much at the till anymore. Makes you think, doesn't it? Cash is still around.
The
and
other one
needed.
to take into account, especially with Victoria, and just message from Damien here, Northwest Queensland still has no power, so none of your ATMs are going to work. None of your FPOS machines.
Wow.
Victoria's, how long have they had rolling? What they call them, brownouts? So like
whatever,
like
Blackouts.
4 hours no power during the day to certain areas. So it's one of those things where you have to have cash, but massive amounts of cash on store.
You know what? I know that I don't trust government at all, and I know that people think that I go too far with it, right? But if you have a look at it, it's a promissory note, or it used to be a promissory note that you get gold or silver or something. Now it's just a promissory note of what I don't know. But here's the thing. We saw, like, for example, in India, what did they do? They just went, right, we've demonetized the currency if it's a note more than $20. Bang. So now all these people that have got higher denomination notes, they can use them. So, I mean, I don't know. Or what you had was a certain time period in which you had to bring the notes back and get smaller denomination notes. so you couldn't hoard them. I don't trust government. That's the thing. And I've seen it. I was predicting it for years, and somebody said to me that I was just being stupid and crazy. And I said, you know what they'll do? They'll get rid of the surcharge for using your cards, but they'll put a surcharge on for using cash.
You know what's really funny?
And I've just finally seen it. I went into a shop, and it was a 2% surcharge if you paid in cash. No surcharge if you used your card.
And then they round up as well on top of
Look,
it.
I'm joking around by holding this up, but like this
It's
is
a fake one. It's Monopoly.
This is so important to have in your pocket at all times, because let's face it, like, ATMs go down, all that sort of thing. It's
really
real.
funny?
What's that?
Yeah, but what if government? But Aaron, you didn't respond to what I said. What if government just turns around and says, "Look, all these people are hoarding cash. We don't want them to. We want them to be in the banking system. So therefore, to bring all your cash in and turn it into our new CBDC, and after that, currency will no longer have any value." What are you going to do?
I'm in trouble. Simple as that, and that's why it's so important for us as citizens to keep cash alive and keep it still flowing in the system. But I mean, look, it's just, there's no perfect answer here, is there?
Well, there is, because even if the bank system turns around and says that that's no longer $50, because we've got all this money that's printed, there's all these people that have hoarded it.
Sure.
The money is an agreement between yourself and me that it's worth what it is.
Yep.
So F the banks, F the government, keep using it.
Well, with the Albanese government, that's worth $48, $46, $44,
So,
$42. I mean, that's pretty much how it's going, right?
Yeah, but that's all money is. It's an agreement between people using it that is valued at what it's valued. So do we really need the government to tell us that $50 note is still worth $50?
Interesting.
So you could turn around and say, right, that $50 will get you an hour's worth of labor.
Yeah, okay.
So then within the internal bartering system, like keep the government and all that out of it, you can just go barter with it. Same as in Venezuela when their economy went to shit and they started using gold flakes.
Yep.
So it wasn't the fact that it was made out of gold. It's just the two people making the trade agreed this gold flake is worth what we say it's worth, so we'll do the trade, and this is a signal of closing the deal.
Very much how crypto works.
It's interesting to see how government gets nervous not having control. That's the key word, because I came across a story recently where police had raided some bikie gang that was taking rocks out of some mines out in the gold fields and were processing it, gold, and they were processing it itself and smelting it and forming it into their own gold, right? And that makes them very, very nervous. And they're going on about how, these chemicals could have spelt in the water supply and that, there's fumes that are going off and doing all this environmental reasoning. I'm thinking that's a load of crop.
Of course it is.
It's a load of crop that you're worried about chemicals ending up in the water and smoke and all that sort of stuff.
Mark McGowan,
you are concerned about losing control of currency. That's
no. The expert on gold, Mark McGowan, wanted to make sure it was the right purity, right? It's the right quality.
I'm going to leave that one alone.
It's just ridiculous. Exactly. You are spot on. It's about control. Full stop. It's about control. And governments do not like us to actually have control of our own lives.
Yeah, look, I honestly think that there'll be a push at some point, which I think cryptos were kind of a symptom of. I think cryptos will change a little bit. And I think you need something that's not just digital in nature, right?
Sure.
I think that there will eventually be a push where we want our currencies to be backed by something. And that something may not necessarily be gold. My personal preference is if you want it to be backed by something, it should be backed by a basket of goods. So it should be backed by a basket of precious metals and commodities, because that would actually also mean that other countries who, we, for example, Australia are mineral rich, New Zealand's not quite as mineral rich as we are, but they're agriculturally rich. They could back their currency with different things so that their currency actually held some value that the country would have the ability to actually pay off. I think that's a good way of doing it. And I actually think that eventually that's exactly what people will say, where, Travis and I will sit down and say, okay, well, look, we've just traded with each other. This represents an hour of labor. But, when you go to the doctor might say, well, look, my hour of labor is actually worth 5 of your hours of labor or something.
Sure.
That sort of thing. I actually think that would be a good alternative. I don't know exactly how that would work. But I think that people don't want to see the debasing of their currency any further. The ability for government to just create currency out of nothing and make us all poorer as a result. People are jack of this. People are really sick of it, and people are getting very worried about the government encroaching on one of the biggest appeals of digital currencies and bitcoins and things like that, cryptos, was that government wasn't involved. It was completely decentralized. Now government wants to get involved. And government's already involved in the on-ramp, off-ramp So, what do you do? I think that we're primed for there to be some sort of change, and it's going to be driven by the majority of people, in my view.
It's interesting, the questionnaires that come out from an accountant asking, will we have to do accounting for crypto accounts? Oh my goodness. They want to know, 1, do you have crypto? 2, were you trading it? 3, did you receive any goods or services paid for by customers in crypto?
Right.
Where is the crypto stored? Which is a security issue to release that kind of information.
Yes, it is.
It's an interrogation in terms of what they're forcing the accountants to ask their clients.
Well, yeah.
And the accountants are there to represent their clients and minimize their tax, not the other way around.
Well, that's right. It was the government outsourcing to the accountants to do their work.
They're doing it with the banks, and they're trying to make the accountants do it now. They're wanting the lawyers to do it.
Yep.
It's just crazy.
That's right.
So,
well, what I would suggest, and I don't know much about crypto, is on the day that your form is filled out by the accountant, move all your crypto into whatever, like a wallet that you don't use very much, with a company you don't use very much. Say, all right, that's where it's stored. That's where it is stored, and then move it away. I don't know if that's legal or not, but to hell with the government. Why should they know all this? Why should they know what I've got, where I've got it? I mean, would you like to know where I keep my socks in my house? I mean, most people keep them in their drawer, but would you like to know
they
which
already
one of my
know.
socks are in? I mean,
they've been watching you.
Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Leave me alone. I'll be okay. Thank you very much.
So a lot of people, I get asked this question all the time. Do I know a good crypto accountant? And I can't say whether they're good or not, but there is one accountant I know of. So I'm just going to put the link into the chat here for it.
Well, to be honest, do that. And also, again,
it's wealthsafe.com.au. That's where you get the details.
Oh,
They're based out
fantastic.
of
Okay,
Victoria.
all right.
Vina is amazing. She's awesome.
Have a word with
and she
Orange Brick
really
Road as
knows
well.
her shit.
Have a word with Brandon at Orange Brick Road as well, because obviously he would be very well switched on with this.
Yeah, Brandon, chuck a comment in the chat if you know of any good accountants as well that are actually, because I find accountants are sort of like doctors. Like some are good, they know about ears, but they don't have a clue about your butthole. And I find accountants are the same. Some know how to do cheap tax returns, but you ask them to do a depreciation schedule for an investment property, and they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
So they deal with certain
You've
areas.
got to find the right team for the right project.
Spot on.
Definitely. I mean, if you're going to go into agriculture or something like that, you've got to find an accountant who knows farming.
That's like anything Derek was saying before, that you'd never be too proud to ask for help. I had a bit of an issue over the last few weeks. I just wasn't too sure about. Rang Derek a few times. Like, Derek, what do you think of this? And then Derek said, "Oh, look, I'm a little bit out of touch now. But I remember before there was a this and a that and I just went, oh, the hell with this." And so we conference called one of our friends who actually works in that specialty, and he walked me through it and talked me through it. And then another one of our friends sorted out what I needed to sort it out, and I didn't have to deal with it. And look, could I have learned it? Yeah, I could have, but I can't be bothered because I can make a phone call and I know somebody who can just tell me the answers. So, and I think that's what's great. Like Derek and I talk to each other all the time, trading ideas. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? So, which, by the way, Derek, while I was on my mind, that last share price, that last share that I actually talked to all three of you guys about late last year is up 50% as of the close on Friday. Just so you know.
Sounds like a winner.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the other thing is, this is just my personal philosophy, especially when I go to events and things like this. I love being the dumbest person in the room because it means I've got the most to learn. So I think
it's also not difficult for you, right, Travis?
All the time. It's a little bit challenging when I'm in the room with Aaron.
Oh, look, honestly, he's normally the dumbest guy in the
I'm
room.
the dumbest room, mate.
Well, when he's alone, but there you go, in the toilet, that'll do.
What about myself and I? There's always three of us.
Enough said. All right, now I think we've got other subjects to jump onto.
Well, speaking of rooms, is there an elephant in the room? I wanted to bring this up.
You've been talking to my mum again.
One of the biggest words. One of the biggest words on search engines at the moment is the word recession.
Yes.
And what my question is the elephant in the room as far as is it the elephant in the room as far as economics is concerned? Now, you're going to love this one again. Okay. You're going to love this one again. The inverted yield curve.
Oh, wow.
You would love the inverted yield curve.
So,
Shaquille loves the inverted yield curve. It's an indicator that basically is looking at bond prices and the face value, and the ones that are further out in time should be positive, but when they aren't, when they're less than the ones that are closer in time, it gets an inverted yield curve, which is often an indicator. Wonderful thing.
I'm sure our audience absolutely are riveted at this. This is great.
Derek, there's $1 million question here. Is the inverted yield curve in yet?
Is the inverted yield curve? Well, it seems that
We
the
have a
inverted
guest.
yield curve
We do have a
is
guess.
actually occurring. And so what I want to know is, are we having the recession that we don't want to admit to? Is that going on in US economy in particular? These are the sort of things we've got to look at. Now, I know that recession is defined by, I know the recession is defined by 2 economic quarters back to back, right? But of course, the Democratic administration wants to redefine recession. So, yeah, is it the elephant in the room? Shak, I'm going to throw this one out.
Yeah, well, I'll go first. Look, here's a really big thing, and I'll just quickly explain what an inverted yield curve is. If you can imagine that you lend your money to the government generally for only 2 years, you would expect the interest rate that you would receive to be lower than if you agreed to lend it to them for 25 years. So if you plot that on a graph, the difference between the interest rate on 2 years and 5 years versus 25 years should be what they call upward sloping, which means that it's a higher interest rate the longer that you tie your money up. If interest rates are higher for a short term, which means that you get paid a higher interest rate for 2 years than you would if you locked your money up for 25 years, that's called an inverted curve. This is normally an indicator of a recession, and I'm not aware of any time that I can think of that I've ever studied in history. Thank you for that, Damien. I can't think of any time in history where we actually had 25 or 26 different currencies with inverted yield curves. So while I don't want to make light of what happened in the US, where they said, oh, we're just going to redefine this. They should have redefined it. Yes, it did fit the criteria for recession. I understand why they did that, because there were some other economic factors in hand at the time. They shouldn't have, though. They should have just said it's a recession, but it's not the same as the others. However, recessions actually tend to occur when the yield curve comes back to normal. Now, it has actually started coming back a little bit, and the conspiracy tinfoil hat wearing person that I am says, I reckon they'll hold this until it's clear that Donald Trump's going to win. And as soon as Donald Trump's going to win, the yield curve will snap back in, and all of a sudden the money will just rush out of the market and will cause a recession. I will also just say, repeating what I said before, learn the system, learn how to best take advantage of it, who's going to benefit the most. There were more millionaires made after the Great Depression than at any other time in history. So get yourself ready, get your investments ready, and get ready to come out punching when that inevitable recession happens. Look, we had Paul Keating, I think Damien said, or one of them, Brandon said, the recession that we had to have from Paul Keating and Bob Hawke. Well, look, they're going to do what they're going to do regardless. And the one person they don't give a flying shit about is you. So just have a look. If you think it's heading towards a recession, structure your investments to take advantage of that. Go for it. But yeah, I think I think the world's heading for a major recession.
Thank you, Shak, for clarifying that in terms of yield curves. I think I've got face value in that. But what I want to say this is, don't believe the headlines the mainstream media is showing you about recessions, because it sounds like doom and gloom. There's such opportunity in these situations, right? As Shak's highlighted, most millionaires, billionaires are made in these times. And there's also a great wealth transfer occurring right now, okay, that people have got to be aware of. One of those is in the whole fact that the baby boomers, they're going to be 65 by 2030 or whatever it is. They're not going to want to.
Baby boomers?
Baby boomers
That'll be
are
like 9.
I'm sorry. Those who are running businesses are retiring, right?
Yep.
And a lot of the kids don't necessarily want to take over those businesses.
Okay.
Right. So there's going to be a lot of businesses, I think, on the market for sale. If you're not wanting to start one from scratch, that's some for entrepreneurs to have a look at in that space. So that's an interesting space that's going on. But this is what we've got to realize, is that a lot of that hoarded wealth is actually being released at this time and is about to be released. And so you've got to go, how am I set up to receive it?
Okay. Can I just make one more comment on the end of that? Sorry. Can I just make one more comment? One of the major complaints around the Western world, pretty much since COVID, has been the cost of living. All right. Now, the United States has taken some credit for having a much lower rate of inflation than its peer group, which is correct at the moment. They've had higher rates, but it's correct at the moment. They also ran a more significant deficit. Without going off the subject, whether or not you should have a bigger deficit or not, that'll be something that economists can debate and study for decades to come. But you just have to look at what they said. All of the reserve banks, central banks in the Western world all said, what we're going to do is we're going to crush demand. Because they can't increase supply, so they said they'll crush demand, which meant that they had to do a few things. One, raise interest rates in order to suck all the money out of people that are paying mortgages. Okay. Two, and that also reduces inflation. Two, drive up the unemployment rate. Three, drive up the rates of mass immigration. Those are all the things that are currently happening. Now, what do those things normally result in? They normally result in a recession. But what's the thing that happens at the end of a recession or during a recession? Cost of living goes down. Right? Cost of living goes down. So if you wanted to buy a house in 2008 in the United States, it was really cheap to do it. Right? And people actually don't realize it was only the 30% unemployment rate then. Right? So, sorry, I'll phrase that. Sorry, 30% of homes is what was lost. It was only like an 8% unemployment rate or something. So the thing is that when we're talking about recessions, I think it's going to happen because they've told us it's going to happen. And it is, technically speaking, exactly what the people asked for. The government is, for once, going to give you exactly what you asked for. And like I've always said, government will give you what you want in the way that's going to hurt you the most every single time. That's why you shouldn't ask them for anything.
Yes. Oh, dear. And on that bombshell, I think we should end the show, to be honest with you. That is an absolute classic. Thank you, gentlemen, for
that bombshell. Surely you're going to say something.
Yes, we can, my friend.
Shaq said, you're fucked. The world's fucked. Okay, see you later. We can't just end it like that.
There we go. Come again.
Awesome. It's funny because you guys can get away with it.
We can. All right, this has been The Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia. We'll see you next week, and of course the replay on Sunday.